you very much. And of course, today is a little bit cozy. There's this L-shaped space over here, but I want to thank our partner as well to avail their place for us, as well as the drinks that they have. So today I'm going to talk about three things before I invite our partner, Calvin from Renaissance. So the main purpose of the Landed Clinic is that is to allow us to have FaceTime together with some of the audiences in the certain district, landed property lovers. So later on, our landed consultants, they're all downstairs. And after this session, we'll actually arrange all the tables and chairs over here so that everybody can get seated. Whatever questions you all want to ask, just feel free to ask, all right? So the very first thing that I'll be talking about will be pricing disparity and movement in District 10. And of course, this will be some of the bubbles that I'll be sharing later. I'll explain in depth what does this mean based on our frameworks. And of course, I understand maybe some of you have not heard of Property Link Brothers before because maybe you have not attended our webinars or come to our landed convention and all that. Second thing is we're going to talk about currently the inventory as well as the transaction in the market. The third will be some of the decision metrics that we are actually using to look at landed property entry prices. So these are some of the frameworks that we have sort of been using on the ground since 2020. The very first one was landed property categorization. It's now known as category 1, 2, 3, and 4. Second one will be the disparity effect pricing. We introduced this during our landed convention this year. We call it the 4 horses DNA. And of course, later I'll talk a little bit about one rising trend in the market, which is the build-up framework as well. So of course, landed homes has, in the past, I would say 4 years, especially after COVID, after a change in the preferences of buyers on the ground, it has really over the year anchored itself as a wealth preservation asset class among residential properties. In fact, when I started 17 years ago in real estate, buyers, our investors on the ground, they prefer condos more than landed. In fact, last time, I still remember my very first experience, my first year on the ground. I went with my mentor at Seletar area, and I was just looking at, hey, why is it that this, the 4-bedder condo is at about 850,000. It was a 99-year condo. That was about 16 years back. But the corner terrace that is just right beside is only at about 1.1 million. The disparity was only 300,000 back then. And that time, landed property has not risen in terms of popularity. And over the years, I think especially in the last 10 years, once all the cooling measures came out, people have started to recognize what we now call which kind of residential assets are softer, which are harder. And this has to do with, of course, the overall inventory in the market. So when we look at the choices of residential properties in the whole Singapore, although our land is very scarce, but of course we have 1.2 million HDB, is growing by about 20,000 units per annum. We have about 370,000 condo and apartments now, is growing at about 10,000 units per annum. GLS land sales comes in about 5,000 per half of the year, based on our government's observation of the supply and demand in the market. However, for landed property, it's only 73,000. It has maintained itself in the last 10 over years. The supply has not increased at all. There's no more new land. And when we look at the overall supply, it has been plateauing since, I would say, very flatly since about 2018. But before that, it was still hovering at about the same range of about probably 670,000, and now it has stabilized at about 73,000. Part of the reason why you see incremental increase is because of subdivision. That means when developers buy big land, they cut into 2 or 3 or 4 units. And then in PLB, basically what we allocate in terms of frameworks for our property buyers and investors, or even if our clients want to sell their homes and we help them to reinvest, we always look at quadrant 1 and 2. Quadrant 1 and 2, in a sense, landed homes are the hardest asset. It has the high growth characteristics, but of course, because of the high quantum, the rental yield is low. And of course, condos with high growth, high rental yield will be preferred. If not, we try to hunt for condos with at least high growth potential in terms of capital appreciation. So this has been the rounds of cooling measures. I always like to show this because in the past, I myself, when I have not studied the market about 10 over years ago, I like to time the market. But I have realized over the years through our analysis, research, is that now we are in a state that if we time the market, we're at the losing end. because Singapore has already reached a stage of maturity in the property segment, and our volume has not been affected by cooling measures, even though in the last 2 years, since 2022, March, until now, where we have Fed increased its interest rates, our volume is still not affected. And in terms of price growth, from 2020 until today, landed property has grown by 37%, condos has grown by about 26% in terms of price growth from an overall price index. So these are all the dots are the cooling measures, and it's very hard to remove already. In fact, I don't think the government can do anything to remove it because people are still waiting to come in to buy in Singapore. Now, this is the blue line basically depicts the landed price index. The green line is non-landed price index. And just want to show a little bit about the current PSF level, but by and large, pure landed properties, and we like to talk about pure landed in the sense that we like to focus on freehold and 999 years landed homes. Now, averagely is at about 1,009 PSF in this quarter. And our volume of transactions has not been affected even after the interest rates rise. So basically, after COVID, basically we enjoy about 1 to 1.5% for about 24 months. But even after we have higher interest rates now at about 2.75 to about 3%, the volume of transactions for residential properties, landed, non-landed, is still overperforming pre-COVID season. So I would say that Singapore has reached a stage of stabilization because most people buy homes to stay and they have to minimally hold for 3 years. So this is just to show the stabilization of the Singapore market. So let's have a look at the overall landed for freehold and 999 years. Now, averagely, we're doing at about 1,910 PSF. You will see that this year, in terms of the number of transactions, it should be the same as last year. Now, one of the reasons why you see this dip was because there was a lot of hype during 2021, and landed prices back then was at a much lower quantum. I give you an example, like 2021, 2.8 million, you can still buy a freehold inter-terrace D19, D28. Now you cannot find anything, minimum is about 4 million, all right? So because of this, a lot of the low quantum units were being absorbed very rapidly because the price was still too close to the condo prices. Now, because now our prices has reached a new level, the quantum, in terms of the number of transactions, it has dipped, but at the same time, we also have higher interest rates over here, all right? So this year, we should end about the same as last year. And this is basically the detached price growth. In terms of the current pricing is about 1,780 across the entire island. Semi-D, also about 1,008. Inter-terrace about 1,009, closing into 2,000 because of its lower quantum. And maybe just a quick introduction of ourselves for those of you that are meeting the very first time. This is our team. Our team is named as Property Lim Brothers, and I myself have been in the industry for 17 years. In 2018, I set up our media arm. Basically, our media team is made up of a team of experts, video editors, digital marketers. We have, of course, our HQ team over here, and this is basically our realty team, which we have set up in the year 2022. So we specialize a lot in private properties. We have a dedicated team. We call them our landed consulting team. And of course, last year, we held our first landed convention in Pan Pac. We have about 400 people that attended. It was a full-day event. This year, we held it in Shangri-La. About 500 people attended. It's a full day of landed properties. We talk about landed properties the entire day, right? And this is our team. And later on, you'll meet some of our consultants downstairs. They are all landed consultants with deep knowledge based on data analysis. They'll be able to advise you whatever advice you have, even when it comes to like rebuild, A&A costing and all that. And of course, for some of the very specific technicalities, please go to Kelvin later. You'll be able to address some of the costing on the ground, what to look out for. So let's have a look at pricing disparity. Now, I like to look at in terms of movement based on, I would say, product category. It is important to know it because when certain price gaps becomes too close, you get new audiences in the landed market. So for example, if let's say the new launch market pricing goes up to a new quantum level, or resale freehold condos go up to a new quantum level, you get a spillover effect of these audiences into the next category. The reason is because people like to shift their capital into the hardest asset. So hardest asset means that if I buy a landed which the supply is fixed and more people buy it, the only way for it is that the price will move upwards because there's no new supply to cool down the demand. So basically, if you have noticed, especially if you are a current landed property owner, sometimes like you open your eyes 5 years later and you call your banker, your valuation just increased like by twice or at least by 50%, right? So the two main drivers in Singapore will be new condos and pure landed properties in terms of pricing. Why do I call it the apex property? Is because it is the most inelastic. That means the supply is fixed, but the demand is growing, right? This has a so-called like a little bit of an unhealthy system in the sense that whatever price that developers launch, the bank will match. So you will notice that when you walk into the show flat, when the developer wants to sell 3,000, you can still get 75% loan based on 3,000 PSF. The developer wants to sell 3,500, you can also get 75% loan. So this is because they have a strong support from bank. That's why they call the shots when it comes to benchmark pricing. Now, once we understand this too, what will happen is that when we look at them from a level of PSF level, this has been a movement since 2020. So let's have a look. If you want to take photos, also can, right? Later on, of course, the slides are with my consultants. They can share with you as well some of the key things you want to know. Now, this has been the situation in 2020. Everything is still pretty flat. We're still looking at launches at about 1,008. And we like to look at the different categories of resale condos versus newly TOP'd condos, means they just collected keys from developers, and brand new launches, plus strata landed, as well as pure landed. Now, in terms of PSF, pure landed is always lagged towards new launches. Why? Because the quantum is bigger. Right? So when we look at a PSF from a land perspective, it's always lower than a strata PSF perspective. So let's have a look at what happened in 2021 when we recovered from COVID. Basically, new launches shift upwards. There was a lot of inventory that was cleared during the COVID season. And once we went to 2022, everybody starts to get shocked at the new launch PSF. It's like developers are all launching at about 2003, 2004, 2005 PSF for OCR area. And what happens next in 2023 last year was that the resale starts to catch up. Because whenever the gap becomes more than 50%, resale will start to catch up by itself, which was why a lot of people deviated their attention to buy resale condos. And pure landed also started to catch up as well. Now, this is where we are at right now, 2024. And what is happening in the market is that when you look at price quantum level, a lot of the low quantum pure landed are being absorbed very rapidly. And probably in about 6 months' time, we look at the whole island, there will be no more inter-terrace that is below 4 million. In fact, the overall inventory is dropping very, very rapidly because people are absorbing them very quickly. And we also want to consider what is happening in the new launch market. So a 4-bedder new launch at about 1,003 square feet is already about 3 over million. 5-bedder, 1,006 square feet, $4.5 million to $5 million. And because of this new quantum behavior, there's going to be more demand or more interest fueling into what we call the apex property, right? So because people will start to think, hey, I buy a 1,003 plus new launch condo or buy 1,007 square feet, it's going to cost me at least 5 million. Why don't I start to look at landed properties, right? Similarly, resale condos are also aging up in terms of quantum. And what is going to happen is that when we see this closeness in gap again between condos and landed, there's new audiences coming in. Now let's have a look at District 10, since we are in District 10 today. And District 10, I'd like to introduce you this concept called Category 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay? Later, I will explain in detail what does this mean. Basically, Category 1, these are homes that you need to tear down and rebuild. So largely, they are homes above 30 over years old. Now, Category 2, these are homes that you need to do a bit of A and A, usually about 2 stories, but not enough bedrooms, not enough built-up space. Then Category 3, 10 to 15 years old home, you usually need to put about 500,000 to 600,000 to renovate. And then, of course, category 4, brand new from developers. Or if you bought a Cat 1 home, a very old single story, you rebuild it after 2 years, that house is then deemed as a Cat 4 home. All right? So that's how we categorize it. Now, this is the current quantum pricing in D10 based on asking price. So I like to look at asking price because why? When we look at transacted price, it's important, but transacted price are usually lagged by 3 to 4 months. And landed property owners, they have strong hands. And if I were to look at transacted price, I would never be able to buy a landed property. But if I can study the asking price, I know the behavior and the mindset of the existing landed owners, then there's a chance for me to spot an opportunity or value buy. So this is inter-terrace in District 10. Of course, District 10, it depends on certain premium enclaves. Certain enclaves are more pricey, certain enclaves are lower in quantum. But by and large, based on the current inventory, this is the range. So Cat 1 homes, you can still see something in the range of about 5.5 million. Cat 2, 6 over million. Cat 3, about 7 odd. Then Cat 4, brand new from developers. There are some listings at about 8.8 million for inter-terraces, right? Now, once I plonk in semi-Ds, basically semi-Ds pricing will look like this. And why is it important to look at this as well? Is because we don't want to be hit in the crossfire zone. So I always call this the crossfire zone. That means, for example, if now I look at the asking price in this season and I go in too high in a certain category, right? So let's say I'm looking at inter-terraces, but I go in at the top tier pricing right now, okay? Maybe like a Cat 4 home. But if I'm just fixated on this inter-terrace as the segment of land that I want to go in, but I never study the next higher tier segment, which is semi-D, I could have looked out on certain opportunities. Because, for example, if I have to put 8.8 million, maybe I can get a Cat 2 semi-D instead of a Cat 4 inter-terrace. But I can upgrade my class in terms of the landed classification, right? So next time when you want to exit, naturally, an inter-terrace will attract inter-terrace group of buyers, corner terrace, semi-Ds. But when you have a chance to go at a higher tiering class, then it will be more ideal, all right? So this is basically semi-D District 10. Base price in D10, at least 6.5, Cat 1. Cat 2, about 7 odd, you can still find. 8 over million, you can still find Cat 3. And of course, Cat 4 will be all the way ranging here. Because the minimum size for a semi-D is 2152 square feet, but sometimes it can go up to about 4,000 plus, depending on the land plot as well, right? Now, once I plonk in detached, it will be in this tier. All right, so it's about spotting the opportunity. Let's say if you're planning to own or maybe get one more landed in D10, look for the opportunities depending on the different classifications. Of course, you can check more later with our landed consultants. Now, one observation is to also compare, because this is 9, 10, 11, we are in CCR. You look at the entry level, which is D19. This is where it is happening at. So that will also mean that certain buyers that were looking at OCR, they might also want to consider CCR as well. Because if they were to go for at least a Cat 3 in, let's say, D19, they can actually go in at a Cat 1 at the core area, which is our central district in D10, in terms of this category over here, right? So let's have a look at some of the existing stock in the market. Now, these are the number of listings as of September. You will notice that in District 10, there are only 54 listings for inter-terrace for sale. Part of the reason is because there's very little inter-terraces here, because there are more semi-Ds in District 10. When we look at District 10, corner terraces is about 60 listings right now. And if you look at semi-Ds for sale right now, there's about 608 listings for sale, which is the second highest in Singapore, the amount of listings. Now, what this tells us is also like, based on certain districts' size in terms of the landed enclave, there are certain types of landed that has more, and there are certain types of landed that have less. Now, what does this mean? Later, I will show you another graph, okay? Now, in terms of detached, you have about 477 listings for sale, which is also the highest amount. Second will be D11 at 410. Strata cluster housing, about 35 listings for sale in D10. And this is just a tabulation. Okay, so when you look at this, then it gives us a better indicator. Because why? When you look at D10, now D10 is one of, I would say, number 3 in terms of sizing. Number 1 and 2 will be D19, D15. Number 3 will be D10 in terms of landed enclave sizing. So in terms of the amount of semi-D, in D10 is about 3,000. Detached is about 2,007. Inter-terrace about 1,001. And of course, that is incomparable to about D19 as well. So sometimes what does this mean is that when there are more of each kind in your district, when it comes to exiting, it's easier to price as well because there's more transactions being clocked. Sometimes in certain districts where there's very, very little of your similar type of houses, when you want to sell, there's not enough transaction volume to bump up your valuation. Yeah, so you might want to look at this to further deep dive. What kind do you want to consider as well, all right? Now, let's move on to transactions that happen in the first 8 months of this year. So basically, Jan to August, in terms of transaction volume, it will go naturally to enclaves that has the biggest type of landed home. So for example, D19, there's a lot of inter-terraces that's been transacted because in and of itself, in the first place, there's a lot of inter-terraces there, all right? Semi-Ds, D10, top the chart, about 53 transactions that happened in the first 8 months. Detached, D10 is about 19. And this is what we call the base quantum pressure observation. So the number of listings left with $4 million and below is about 273 listings in the whole island with at least 1,005 square feet of land. Corner terrace, they are only left with 46 listings if it's below 4.5 million. Semi-D is about 158 listings below 5 mil. And then when we look at a bigger land plot size for semi-D, that is about $5 million. Basically, that is about 185 listings, so on and so forth. Now, this is of course the entire island-wide, but this is just to look at the base quantum pressure of listings of a lower quantum being absorbed. Once these are being absorbed, landed asking price will now then slowly, gradually move up to a new tier, okay? So let's have a look at the last portion here, is that how do we make a decision when it comes to investing in a landed or second landed or third landed property? We have quite a fair bit of frameworks that I have developed with our research team since 2021. The most commonly used will be basically the decision matrix first. So usually step 1, we look at the district selection. Then we deep dive into the enclave selection based on which landed enclave. And then after that, we look at step number 3, which is we want to consider what we call the DNA of the landed. Why is the DNA important? Because if the DNA is not thought through, when you want to sell, you will face issues, right? Why is it that we know that? It's because over the last 8 years, when we started PLB with all our videos and everything, most of our first few clients are usually having difficulty selling their properties, and they come to us. And of course, nowadays, people with very beautiful homes, they also come to us because they want us to ensure that we can sell at a max exit price. Now, we want to look at this from a lens of a buyer. So when we look at this from a lens of a buyer is that I want to make sure the DNA of the home is good. I'll talk about that later. How much do we value enhance? Okay, how much do we spend on A&A rebuild, reconstruction? How much do we offer? And then before we put on the check, we look at some of the statistics over here, step number 4. So I want to talk a little bit about the DNA first. If you see a landed with good DNA, we call it a good DNA horse. Okay, very simple. So good DNA horse is very strong, all right? In a sense, it don't have inherent characteristics that you cannot change. Meaning, it's not facing a substation, example, right? It's not facing the expressway. It doesn't have a heavy artery road. Outside doesn't have a single white line in the center, double yellow line that don't allow you to park more cars, or the road is narrow and stuff like that. Or maybe it's facing Cheong Law and all that. So these are what we call DNA characteristics. These are things that you cannot change. The house, you can change, because whatever is on your plot, you want to tear down, rebuild multiple times, you can also do that, all right? We call that value enhancement. Now, when you buy a house that has a good DNA and you value add to it, we call it a stellar horse, all right? And then when you buy a house with poor DNA, we call it basically a poorer DNA horse. But when you enhance it, it's also not too bad, okay? So it becomes an enhanced horse. So some of the houses is inherent characteristics not good around it, but it's fully rebuilt, or the design is beautiful, but you can still get sold, all right? So why is this important? Because this has to do with the entry price we offer to the seller. We need to know what kind of value are we getting. So we need to know the category of it before we put down the check, all right? And it has to be combined with category 1 to 4. That means we must firstly know this house, is it a full-on rebuild, A&A, minor renovation. For example, let's say full-on rebuild, at least I need to be ready with $400, $450, all right? If I want to A&A, $300 plus minus, I want to renovate at least $100 PSF. I want to buy direct from developer to save time, right? And how we do it is that when you go down with our consultants on the ground, they have this table. And this table, they will plonk in the shortlisted listings in terms of their asking price into this table to compare and see if we can spot certain opportunities. After that, we will plonk in the DNA of the house. So once we have these two data, together with the pricing, then we can make a decision. For example, sometimes we might spot basically a good DNA horse that is in the price range that compared to, let's say, enhanced horse. Okay, so this is just an example. Maybe sometimes you are looking at a state whereby you found a good DNA horse, but it's actually cheaper than a poorer DNA horse. So once you have that kind of comparisons, it becomes clearer. So these are the three levels, basically in terms of the pricing in the market, the category, as well as the condition in terms of what we call the inherent characteristics. Now, this year especially, we are starting to see a new trend in the market, which I'm not sure whether it will become a trend or not, but I believe it is becoming a trend in the next few years. Why? Because construction cost is getting expensive, and this is what we call the build-up framework. So I just want to show a short clip of a recent home tour that we did, just to have a quick explanation of what we think might come up in future, all right? So this is a house that we just launched recently at Jalan Tanjong, 6.5 million massive build-up. Let me just play the short clip. Which then brings us to the latest framework that I want to introduce to everybody, is that landed property is going to shift to a new norm of looking at the build-up area. Let me just flash some articles from the shop house market. In the past, we always talk about the land PSF for the shop houses, but now, in the past years, we have started to talk about the build-up PSF as well, because it's very expensive to construct, to A&A, material costs are increasing, time is precious, manpower cost is high as well, and the opportunity cost is something that a lot of investors are thinking whether is it worth to invest that time in. That means if I'm comparing two shop houses, the land plot size might be the same. If this has a build-up of 4,000 square feet compared to something at 5,000 square feet, which one can command a higher value? Because the build-up is precious. Similarly, when we look at landed property, this is what is happening in the market. Let's say you've managed to find an inter-terrace at $3.8 million in D16, but the build-up is at 2,005 square feet. Technically, you're buying the old structure for 1,520 PSF. And I'm just talking about the old structure. I haven't even added in the cost to rebuild it. If you want to achieve a total build-up of 6,000 square feet, you're going to spend $400 times 6,000 build-up that you want to achieve, and that's at $2.4 million. And then when you add that back to the 3.8 million, this is technically going to be your total cost. And your total cost is going to be at 6.2 million plus 2 to 2.5 years. Now, this brand new home is asking at $6.5 million. If I divide by 6629 build-up area over the 3.5 story, this is going to give you a PSF of $980 per square foot. So PSF for build-up is important. Why? because we're all hunting for space now. Whether you buy a condo, you buy a cluster house, you buy an apartment, you buy a landed property, it is the build-up that you are living in. This is at $980 per square foot for build-up. Alright, so basically that's just to share a trend that we observe in the shophouse market. So in the past, when we look at shophouses, we usually look at the land. But now, in recent years, for shophouses, we don't talk about the land anymore. We're all talking about the build-up. In future, I'm not sure whether landed property will go into this era as well, that people will start to really focus more on about the build-up space because they don't want to spend that time to do works, right? So just a very quick sharing of what our team does when it comes to whether it's exiting or entering into the landed market, is that we like to use the approach of transparency selling. But most importantly, when we sell, we adopt the lens of a property seller. When we buy, we adopt the lens as a property buyer. So this home was already sold by our PLB team, but what happened previously was that the previous owner was trying to exit, got in about 11 agents through a period of about a year, couldn't be sold. The reason is because of the long walkway, so we call it a house behind a house. In fact, when our owners shared with us was that when all the agents were doing the marketing and stuff like that, it was purely photographs, but most of the time, they didn't tell the buyer that it is a house behind a house and there's a long driveway. So a lot of buyers don't want to spend the money to buy the long driveway. So some of the buyers, when they come, they don't even want to enter. All right. In fact, this property was sold by Patricia. You can meet her later. So our approach has always been that when we want to position a property, we should talk about the obstacle first. And we solve the obstacle so that this becomes transparent. Because at the end of the day, all landed buyers are very savvy. And we want to save time. And we just want to see what solutions are there. So how we position the home was really to offer solutions on how you can utilize the long driveway in a very realistic manner. And we didn't avoid the problem. They were technically standing at the long driveway to sell the home and to talk about the possible solutions, right? There were only less than 7 viewings conducted, but all the buyers that came didn't talk about the long driveway. Eventually, somebody that loves long driveway bought a home. And it was sold within 6 months, right? Now, this was 45 standard. We have already sold it. Now, one of the key issue was that this was a Cat 3 home, but there was not enough bedrooms. But after we walked through with our builder, basically we found that there's a chance to reconstruct a bedroom upstairs. So usually our approach will always be to showcase the solution before the viewing even take place. Now, nowadays, in today's real estate market, we believe that the home tour is the first viewing. The physical viewing is actually the second viewing. And the home tour gives us so much eyeball exposure to potential buyers. And then once they come, most of the roadblocks that the buyers potentially might have has already been solved. So of course, all this, we only do it once our builder walk through, our architect walk through and certify that it can be done. Then of course, we'll visualize it with our team. So we have a large team, about 30 over people who are having different expertise, motion graphics, 3D visualizations, video editing as well. Last but not least, this was a very interesting case study. So when the owner tore down the corner terrace, he decided not to rebuild it. Because after he tore down, he looked at the plans, everything was already done up, but he realized that it was too small. So he wanted to go for a bigger home. And when he approached us to sell, we technically have to sell a bare land that with granite on it. But because of this, there was a new problem that we learned as well, is that the banks don't want to finance up to 75%. The banks were a little bit fearful. They only want to finance 50% for the next buyer. So all I did was that, of course, when I started real estate 7 years back, all my seniors tell me to sell homes in a very stealth mode. But for PLB, we are always very open. In fact, we talk about which house we are selling and all that. Because I think most importantly is we want to show value to the buyer and to help our seller to exit. So for this home, we show the plot, fly drone. We build up the visualization based on the architect's plan because our seller already have the architect's plan. So we morphed it up using Unreal Engine. We did our 3D visualization and stuff like that. Showcase it, internal visualization as well. Guess what? Eventually, we sold it to a property agent. So he bought for his own stay. So property agents are the hardest to sell to, but we managed to sell to a property agent. And yeah, so basically that's how we approach landed properties. Now, If you're keen in a landed investment journey, this is step A to E on how we approach. We usually sit down through a consult session, have prep in terms of discussion, needs analysis, location analysis. We look at the moat analysis, and then after that, we try to hunt for value for you. And then, of course, forward planning in the eventual stage. And this is our team. And if you're keen on one-to-one consultation, later there's a QR code. You can also approach our consultants downstairs. They have QR codes for you to scan. If you want to meet further, deep dive in our office, that can be done. Now, we have a very interesting thing coming up in October 26, 27. This is very exciting.
We have a very exciting new segment that's coming up. This is the first time we're going to hold this Property Summit in a very enjoyable and interactive fashion. That is our Property Summit 2024. 10 different trainers, 10 topics, 5 playbooks, whiteboard sessions, 350 seats over these 2 days. This Property Summit allows you to encompass knowledge, skills. You can execute it on the ground. How do you translate knowledge into practical, executable strategies on the ground? Scan the QR code, click on the link right down below. I hope to see you on 26th and 27th October. Take care.
So what's going to happen is that there's going to be 10 topics. There's going to be whiteboard sessions. We have 5 playbooks. We're going to have breakout rooms. So we are going to have certain portions where everybody will gather at the mega hall. Basically, we'll talk about market trends, the property forecast for next year and all that. But then we have breakout rooms based on the topics you are interested in. For example, if you're interested in landed property, there are 2 topics. All right, one is on landed property investment. The other one is really on costing, like A&A rebuild, what to look out for, sewage line, road line plan, and all that kind of stuff. Condo investment, there's also 2 topics. We have property financing strategy, HDB upgraders for younger couples, and of course, property portfolio strategy, like how our investors actually expand their portfolio to own like multiple properties. So there's going to be whiteboard sessions. There's going to be main topics. There's 10 topics altogether. And this is going to be like the space that we'll be in. It will be in town area at Clarke Quay. We're finalizing the event very soon, but it will be held on a Saturday and then half day on a Sunday. All right? So this is going to be basically the main punch. So there are 10 topics that we'll be talking about, 5 different playbooks, whiteboard sessions. It's held over 2 days. We only got 350 tickets, all in the value based on the event, the effort, and basically the things that we'll be sharing is worth about $1,500 we calculated, but we're doing it at $399. The first 50 participants will be able to get the tickets for $199. Then the other 300 tickets will be at $399. So we're confident this will be a sell event. In fact, this is the first group that we're talking to because we haven't launched any ads yet. We just finalized basically the details yesterday. So if you're keen also to join our free landed VIP club that we release charts, analysis, trends on a periodic basis, you can scan this later. So these are all the QR code that you can scan. Plus some of the missing ones later on, just get from our consultants. They have the full slide deck. All right, so thank you very much. Thank you guys. See you later.